Chris Mack is out as the head men's basketball coach at the University of Louisville. We'll discuss a timeline for a potential new hire while identifying both realistic and unrealistic candidates for the job on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. It was announced on Wednesday that the University of Louisville and head men's basketball coach Chris Mack agreed on a buyout settlement in which the fourth-year head coach would no longer be at that position for the Cardinals. Now, one of the top jobs in America is open, arguably a top 7 to 8 job. We will discuss a possible timeline that the university may look to make a new hire while also introducing and identifying both realistic and unrealistic candidates for the position. Before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I serve as both a football beat writer and a recruiting analyst. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. You can check out my personal Twitter in the graphic in the bottom left hand of your screen, and you can follow the podcast Twitter page at LO_Louisville. So obviously an interesting time for the University of Louisville fan base when it comes to a head basketball coach. Obviously, the Mack era wasn't necessarily all it was hyped up to be. He was hired in 2018. Let me start out by saying, best of luck to Coach Mack. Although things didn't necessarily work out the way that we had wanted them to here at Louisville. He's still a very nice guy, a very nice family. We wish them the best of luck. He still is a good coach in my opinion. Things just didn't necessarily work out here at Louisville, and it happens. Unfortunately these things happen, and we wish him the best of luck. No doubt that he is going to land on his feet wherever he decides to go. So wish him the best of luck. We also need to call a spade a spade. The University of Louisville basketball job is a top 7 to 8 job in America. I understand, yes, it might not necessarily be as, success. The program might necessarily be as successful as it was, when Rick Pitino was here. Outside of 2015, the program really hasn't done, virtually anything in the NCAA tournament. Has missed the NCAA tournament multiple times due to, a scandal and self-imposement, the coronavirus, and, missing the tournament in 2021 and possibly now in 2022. But still, due to, fan atmosphere, the facilities, the KFC Yum Center, the overall conference prestige, the history of the program, Louisville is a blue blood in my opinion. They check off all of the boxes. The TV ratings, the fan support is through the roof as well, especially in a basketball hotbed like the state of Kentucky. Now, obviously, you have your Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, Kansas, UCLA, and then beyond that, there's a handful of other programs. But I think that Louisville is squarely in that 6 to 8. Frame when it comes to the most historic programs in the country, historically speaking, and it is a top 7 to 8 job in America. So there's no doubt that there are going to be a long list of candidates that will likely be mentioned over the next couple weeks before Louisville makes a decision. When discussing a possible time frame, this is kind of where it gets tricky. If you're looking for Louisville to make a decision soon, well, they might make that decision soon. Now, the announcement, however, could be a while. Obviously, there are 10 games left remaining in the regular season for the Louisville Cardinals. Mike Pegues taking over as the interim head coach. Went 5-1 when Chris Mack was suspended earlier to start the season. But this is likely a decision that will be announced somewhat early on in the month of April. Now, some people think, well, why that long? Well, the candidates that we're going to mention, both realistic and unrealistic here in the next couple of segments, a lot of them are, head coaches at current college programs. So, some are going to be in, NCAA tournament hunt. Others are going to be, fighting for top 4 seeds in the tournament. So you just don't necessarily see a head coach in that position leave, in the middle of the season, especially, with NCAA tournament, ramifications, or maybe not ramifications, but implications on the line, with the possibility of making a deep run. So I think that Louisville is going to do their homework. They're going to do their due diligence. It's going to be a rather extensive search, even if they may necessarily have, 1 to 2 guys that, they kind of have circled up at the top, maybe even the top 5. I still think that they vet a handful of candidates. Maybe this hasn't been something that comes as a surprise. So, who knows how deep into the search the Cardinal program is. But I think that there are a lot of good options for interim athletic director Josh Hurd to choose from and to interview and stuff like that. So in terms of a potential timeline, I think you're looking for Louisville to probably make a hire almost immediately after the NCAA tournament. For example, if a team, loses early in the tournament, you could see an announcement in the next couple of days after that, or just after the tournament outright early on in the month of April. Now, the reason for the hastiness and the much needed timeline is the fact that, well, with the state of college basketball and the one-time transfer rule, and guys reclassifying and trying to hold on to your players and not have to, be forced to do a whole roster rebuild to where, you're at least competitive the next season. The quicker Louisville makes a head coaching hire, the quicker they're able to finalize their roster for 2022-2023 campaign. Now, it is yet to be seen how many will transfer out, if any. There hasn't been any so far as of Wednesday night when this is being recorded, but we'll see how that goes. They have Kamari Lands, Deontay Davis, Frederick King, who are all committed to the Cardinals in this class. So we will see if there are any decommitments. But also being able to utilize the transfer portal after the NCAA tournament, there are likely going to be a handful of notable transfers that the new head coach, whoever that may be, could possibly choose from and try to convince to come here. Obviously to try to ensure that this team makes the NCAA tournament next season. But there are a handful of solid candidates that I'm excited to discuss over the next couple weeks. Like I mentioned, we'll identify, some of them here in the next couple segments. We won't go too in depth, just to, introduce some of them and, give a little bit of thought into that. But overall, my message to Card Nation right now is to be patient. Obviously, we would like a hire, tomorrow if we could, or today. But ultimately, that's just not how these things work. There are going to be a lot of rumors that come out here in the next couple weeks. So I would suggest taking things with a grain of salt, understanding that sometimes agents, put things out there to get their clients, raises. With Louisville being such an attractive and, prominent position opening up, there are going to be a handful of coaches that, try to get their name into the mix to, possibly drive the university that they are employed at right now into being, inclined to give them a raise or, increase their incentive package, etc. So be patient. Take everything with a grain of salt. Understand context. But do yourself a favor. Just don't get divided over this. Regardless, I trust that the university is going to do a full extensive search. So let's move on into some, identifying some of the realistic options that Louisville could go with. Some we've talked about, all over Twitter so far, and some that haven't necessarily got a ton of attention. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends at NetSuite. I want you to imagine a scenario. This is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. It's the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of the competition. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite for the new year. NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for the special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses, netsuite.com/locked. All right, so we mentioned there have already been a plethora of names thrown out on social media that people are thinking that Louisville is going to go after, they should go after, or would just be a pipe dream down the road. So we'll kind of break off into two categories. This segment here will be dedicated to realistic possibilities that I think Louisville has a chance with, should they choose to utilize that route and hire that candidate. So we'll start out with the obvious, the most probably popular name out there so far that is getting a lot of traction is New York Knicks assistant coach, former University of Louisville national champion in 1986, and former University of Kentucky assistant. That is Kenny Payne, which has gotten a lot of traction so far when it comes to potential for former players. A lot of the fan base, the fan base is kind of divided. Very quickly, I'll tell you, my initial thoughts. We'll break down his, case for being a candidate later on here in the next couple episodes. But I think Kenny Payne would be a great addition to the University of Louisville men's basketball program. Not only does he bring the recruiting prowess, but he also has, played a big role in player development. When you talk to players from the Knicks, they've gone on record saying that he has done wonders when it comes to developing their respective games. R.J. Barrett is one to focus on. Julius Randle, who just got a big payday, had a career year last year with the New York Knicks, has, attributed Kenny Payne to some of that growth as well. Nick Richards, while at Kentucky, Willie Cauley-Stein, both of those big men have developed very nicely. Now, obviously, the concern is that he has not been a head coach. 56 years old, has not been a head coach, but I do think that he would bring a lot of booster presence back. There would be a lot of fan backing, former player backing, and something that this fan base truly needs, that is, a unifying force. So Kenny Payne is one, candidate to focus on. There's a handful of SEC guys that have been talked about, most notably Auburn head coach Bruce Pearl. Now, whether or not, it's feasible, it seems like, there is interest. There's been people that have put out that there is interest from Pearl in the position. Now, obviously, the Maryland position could be enticing for him as well, and you have to consider whether or not he would truly leave Auburn now, as they are the #1 team in the nation. But Bruce Pearl has been mentioned. Also in the SEC, there have been three guys. Alabama head coach Nate Oates. Nate Oates is a guy that makes sense to me. I like the fact that he's a very good recruiter. The Crimson Tide have struggled at times this year, but with a $12 million buyout, I question, just how plausible this opportunity would be to get him. Arkansas head coach Eric Musselman. There's been, some, conflicting viewpoints on him. It seems like opposing, fan bases aren't necessarily fond of him, but obviously that wouldn't matter if he was a part of the Louisville fan base. He does very well at getting transfers to come together and mesh and play as a group. But the Razorbacks, arguably are having a tougher year than previously expected. Some other Power 5 head coaches that have been discussed. Purdue head coach Matt Painter. A lot of people have kind of gone back and forth on this. Not a huge fan. I like Matt Painter. I know that, we can focus on, the, fizzle out in the tournament that it seems like the Boilermakers do, here and there, although they made a couple of, I think they made an Elite Eight back in 2019. Yeah, I was at that game. One of the best college basketball games that I've seen with Carson Edwards catching fire. But anyway, when I watch Purdue offensively, sometimes it's a little rough, but I love, how the team kind of buys into that, just the overall identity that they have, especially on defense. I like what I see from Matt Painter. There's also UCLA head coach Nick Cronin that has been rumored, and linked to the job. Former University of Louisville assistant coach that has ties to the Midwest. Ultimately, I think that this is kind of one of those to where it's maybe, possible right fit, but completely wrong timing. He has the Bruins rolling, in the Pac-12 at arguably a better job than Louisville in Los Angeles. Recruiting really well. UCLA a Final Four appearance last year. Top 10 this season. So I have a hard time believing that he would truly leave UCLA for Louisville unless he is just very bent on coming back to the Midwest. There's also USC coach Andy Enfield. If you know me, I was a huge fan of Dunk City back in 2013, when Enfield was the head coach of Florida Gulf Coast. He was, when I watched that team all season long, I loved, how energetic they were on both ends of the court. They really bought into the Cinderella mantra, but he's not necessarily a one-hit wonder. He very solid in his career at Florida Gulf Coast. Comes to USC, had a couple of underwhelming seasons, but has shown that he is a better recruiter than have been rumored. Got both of the Mobley twins, some other guys at USC, Onyeka Okongwu, who ended up being a lottery pick in the NBA. So I think he's pretty solid. He's one of those coaches that when you think about Andy Enfield, he may not be the most appealing choice, but I think he would be pretty solid. He has East Coast ties, so maybe he looks to make the move, but ultimately he's probably a guy that the fan base might not necessarily be all too excited about, but I do think he would have the tools to be successful here at Louisville. There's also Kentucky native and Ohio State head coach Chris Holtmann, who has been mentioned. This is one where I'm kind of going back and forth because you see that he's a player's coach. Guys love playing for him. He's very solid in terms of player development. Guys get the most out of their development, inside of his program. But this is a team that in his 5 years as the head coach of the Buckeyes, he has not made it past the first weekend, especially since being the number 2 seed last year and losing to Oral Roberts. So he's one of those to where, fit-wise and narrative-wise, I think it may be solid, but I wonder how that would go in terms of the long run. There's also another guy that was mentioned by, I think it was WDRB or somewhere, that was Wake Forest head coach Steve Forbes. He was actually on that staff with Bruce Pearl at Tennessee when Bruce Pearl, obviously got fired. Forbes went to Eastern Tennessee State, where the Buccaneers were one of the best mid-major teams for a handful of seasons. One of the teams that was always kind of a giant killer, so to speak. He goes to Wake Forest, who was at the bottom of the ACC in year 2. He has them competing for an NCAA tournament bid. So although, kind of like Andy Enfield, to where maybe not necessarily the most appealing coach, candidate out there, he is a very solid coach, gets the most out of his players, and, obviously is very solid in turning programs around. So I think that Steve Forbes is another, coach that you can look at. There's a handful of other ones, outside of the Power 5. Obviously, one that'll be focused on, some in terms of conversation is former Louisville assistant Kevin Willard at Seton Hall. There's also Mark Pope from BYU. Both of those guys have been very successful at their, current stops. Not necessarily, a ton of tournament success, but all, very solid, in their roles in the group of 5. Scotty Davenport from Bellarmine has gotten some traction, from parts of the fan base. I'm not sure how inclined Louisville would be to make that decision, considering that it's there's a big risk when it comes to recruiting, considering Bellarmine just got to Division I, but he's it's obviously he's a very solid X's and O's coach. He's a beloved figure in the city of Louisville. Would be a solid short-term solution, but it really just depends on where Josh Hurd is putting, what he's prioritizing in terms of this hire. There's also a couple other guys, on the outside looking in. Drew Valentine from Loyola Chicago, obviously taking over for Porter Moser. He's 15-3 right now for the for the Ramblers up in Chicago. He's kind of on the outside looking in, only 30 years old, but one of those guys that has been revered as a possible up-and-comer. There's also Matt McMahon from Murray State. Not necessarily sure that he gets a look, but he's been a guy that has been, been one of those guys to get the most out of players in his program. Guys get to the NBA, etc., and they're always, in contention for the OBC. There's a couple other guys in the group of five. One's in the AAC, one's in the Big East. There's Wes Miller from Cincinnati, used to coach UNC Greensboro, who was, a solid mid-major. Fun fact, I got to see Wes Miller in action last year at the Wade Houston Tip-Off Classic at the Yum Center. It was the first D1 college basketball game that I announced between the UNC Greensboro Spartans and the Duquesne Dukes. So, it's pretty cool. But Wes Miller, very, very solid in terms of coaching, has Cincinnati in a good spot. There's also Ed Cooley from Providence. He's been a guy who, has the Friars, right now 17-2, I believe. They're ranked in the top 25. All these group of five, candidates are ones that, probably aren't going to get the fan base, back on board just yet. It's kind of one of those prove me opportunities, but they're like I said, this is just kind of introducing, and we'll go more into depth on these guys, here in the next couple weeks to come. We've got some time, unless Louisville, pulls a surprise. It pulls a rabbit out of a hat and makes a quick hire, but I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case. They're going to do their homework in this particular coaching search because it is possibly, one of the most important coaching hires, outside of Rick Pitino, in men's basketball history. But obviously, there's only been a handful of them, so to speak, but it's very important that Louisville gets this right. Any of the, the Power 5 head coaches, I think right now, if you made me go with a big board of who I would like to see as Louisville head coach, I think Kenny Payne and Bruce Pearl are 1A, 1B. Outside of that, I'm really kind of on the fence. I like Andy Infield. I think he's a pretty solid, possibility. Eric Musselman's, pretty decent as well. Nate Oates, if it wasn't for that $12 million buyout, I'm kind of on a short list of probably 1A, 1B with Payne and Bruce Pearl. We'll kind of see how things, unravel here in the next couple of weeks when guys turn down jobs. There could be some that, pop into the conversation, with Chris Mack officially gone. But I want to take this time now to focus on the unrealistic candidates that I've been seeing out there that at this time, aren't necessarily going to be an option for the Cardinals. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond, and it remains your number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. A new year and a new updated desktop and mobile website that you can use to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using the promo code LOCKEDON. From all your favorite sports right to all your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports, and BetOnline is where the game starts. Hey, Cardinal fans, this is your host, Dalton Pence, with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about, GetUpside. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free GetUpside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use the promo code SCORE for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill-up cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using GetUpside. Just download the app for free and use the promo code SCORE. And the biggest thing is that there is no catch. The cash back gets added right back to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, e-gift card, for Amazon, etc. Just download the free GetUpside app or use the promo code SCORE to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. Once again, that is code SCORE for 25 cents per gallon or more back on your first tank. Final segment of this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast is dedicated to identifying the unrealistic candidates for the University of Louisville men's basketball head coaching position that is now open. First we'll start with the blue bloods of college basketball, the untouchable coaches, so to speak. That should really, shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. It's John Calipari, Mark Few, Jay Wright, Bill Self, etc. Those coaches have no incentive to leave their current programs and come to Louisville, nor would they. you'll probably consider. It's just kind of one of those things to where, Josh Hurd does have, ties obviously back to Villanova and Jay Wright. But at the end of the day, I just don't necessarily think that with Wright being a Philadelphia native and with Villanova, winning 2 national championships since 2016, I just have a tough time believing that Wright would be, truly considering this position. Also, a couple other coaches, especially in the college realm. There's one in particular that is Baylor head coach Scott Drew. When it comes to Drew, I've seen, a couple Louisville fans, mention it here and there on social media platforms. And although it looks good on paper and you feel like, Louisville is a better program historically than Baylor, better facilities, more historical prominence, just overall fan support, etc. At the end of the day, I think that with Baylor winning a national title last year and the year before also being in contention, and then this year they're also top 10, I just don't necessarily see, how appealing this position would be to Scott Drew. Like I said, it could be the same thing with Mick Cronin, to where it maybe not necessarily is a wrong fit, but it's definitely wrong timing. At this point in time, I don't understand why Scott Drew would leave his post at Baylor, where he is, continually competing for national championships, has finally, brought that program to a new height. Not necessarily a potential fit there, in my opinion. The other unrealistic candidates kind of stem from NBA coaching positions. Obviously, the season is here. The whole Brad Stevens is ready to go back to the college game season is back. It's not. I feel like if Brad Stevens would have, I've got the hiccups. Wow. If Brad Stevens would have decided to come back to college, I felt like if it was any position, it would have been last year during the cycle where Indiana made their head coaching hire, because that makes sense to for him in terms of his roots, back to Butler, etc. He goes back to the Hoosier State, but time and time again, Brad Stevens has turned down numerous college jobs after college jobs, and it's very evident that he likes what he's doing with the Boston Celtics. So I think that, a lot of people will say this, in a, a joking way and, kind of a sarcastic tone. But there are some people that truly believe that Brad Stevens would entertain the Louisville position. I got to be honest. I don't want to be that guy, but I've told you all on this show multiple times, I'm not going to sunshine pump, but I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer. I'm going to call it how I see it, whether that be good nor bad, or bad. I mean, I'm just going to be real. I think that that's what you as the fan base deserve, is the clear transparency, and especially where I'm feeling. I don't necessarily think that Brad Stevens is an option, nor is Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan, when he got fired in OKC, was one of those possible options that will look. When a coach gets fired, it's a different story. Now, who knows when Billy Donovan got fired, if the Louisville job had opened simultaneously when, he was, taken from the Oklahoma City head coaching position, maybe there's a conversation to be had, although sometimes, coaches just like the professional ranks better than, the collegiate realm. Obviously, recruiting is very time consuming, so that takes away some of the responsibility when you don't have to do that. But right now, Billy Donovan, the head coach of the Chicago Bulls, the Bulls are, right now in contention for, the Eastern Conference. So at this point in time, I just don't necessarily see, I get the allure, and I get why he would possibly be interested if the stars aligned, but context matters. The Bulls are right now a contender in the Eastern Conference, with DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, Kobe White, the list goes on, etc. I just don't necessarily see how far of a conversation this would go. Also, we've been seeing it. I'm not going to deny it. I have to mention it. Rick Pitino is not coming back. I mean, who wouldn't want Rick Pitino back? Hall of Fame head coach, one of the best college basketball coaches in history. But obviously, I think that where we're at right now, I just don't necessarily see that being entertained. With Pitino coming back for a variety of reasons. So right off the bat, we need to go ahead and nip that possibility, so to speak, or that's possibility in terms of a scenario. But overall, like I said, these are just a couple candidates. Whether or not they're serious candidates or not, that's to be determined, yet to be seen. These are just some that we've been hearing about. I've been seeing on social media. There are likely going to be some more that pop out of the woodwork here in the next week to couple weeks. So like I said, for Louisville fans, the process right now is just to enjoy it. Enjoy the journey. Obviously, we want the head coaching hire, sooner rather than later, but just sit back and relax and everything will work out. Have faith in interim athletic director Josh Hurd. I like the way he conducted himself in the the press conference that announced the Mack buyout agreement. And also shout out to Coach Mack. I appreciate obviously probably not going to listen to this, but in the event that you do, definitely appreciate your hard work and your dedication and passion to this university the past 4 years. Thank you for coming into this program in 2018 with open arms. Wish you and your family the best of luck in your future endeavors. And whether that be, your future in Louisville or wherever you may end up, definitely believe that you will get back on your feet. So overall today, talked about and discussed the potential timeline of a new hire, identified the realistic and unrealistic candidates. Obviously, tomorrow's episode will be, kind of diving into, the top of the big board. And we'll also have a crossover episode with JJ Jackson, the host of Locked On Blue Devils, to preview the Duke matchup. So we will, throughout the next couple weeks, dive into certain candidates, discuss a candidate's case for the position in length, talk about resume, coaching style, etc., recruiting, all that good stuff, possible allure to the program. You name it. If you have any suggestions on who you would like to see me discuss in terms of, coaching options, be sure to send me a DM at defense_, as you see in the bottom left hand of your screen. Also, the Locked On Louisville Twitter pages at LO_Louisville if you so choose to utilize that direct message as well. A couple quick shots before we get out of here. First to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. Jeremy Wallman and crew have been on it in terms of the Louisville basketball program in the past couple weeks. You can find the most recent episodes at cardinalsportszone.com. Also, the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert analysis from Lee Sterling. You can get that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcasts. Thanks go out to everyone for making us your first listen of the day. Everyone that is liking, sharing, rating, subscribing to the podcast on any social media or listening platform. It is definitely appreciated. I cannot thank you enough. That's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Relax, Card Nation. We're in good hands, and we will be back. We'll see you tomorrow.